MSATP TV Facebook Live. Welcome to Thursday, August 30th, 2018. Where did the summer go? I'm Ellen Silverstein, current president of MSATP, and our esteemed executive director, Sandy, is away on vacation. Like, really? So anyway, here we are today with Kait LeDonne.
Hi, everybody.
From LeDonne Branding and Marketing. Kait has been a huge advocate for us and the work being done here at the Society, and has brought with her a huge, deep understanding and broad breadth of knowledge to our organization. Part of that has included broadening our reach to our members and providing them up-to-date technical and trending updates to what is going on in the tax and accounting professions. No grass is growing here. IRS and Congress are not allowing that. So good for business, somewhat stressful for those of us in it and the business to keep up and adapt. It's been quite interesting. That being said, one way to keep up with the latest and greatest in what's going on in the industry and what's going on in the world is listening to podcasts. Yes. What is a podcast? Yes.
What are podcasts?
What are podcasts? It's a person or persons providing thought-provoking information to an audience. So there are thousands of podcasts, probably more like millions probably at this point.
Oh my goodness, definitely at this point.
About all sorts and types of subjects. Some of them are of the homegrown variety, not professionally edited or that include background music, etc. Just someone talking into their computer or tablet and sharing an idea or concept. Others are definitely more professionally done. As an example, I'm a big fan of the author Malcolm Gladwell. He's written some very interesting books such as Tipping Point, Blink, and Outlier. These are great books that delve into the nature and being of how businesses think or they operate, how our society works within those frameworks, and some with success, many without. What is the tipping point? And if you blink, you might miss it. So Malcolm Gladwell has a podcast professionally done called Revisionist History. It is unrelated at all to anything business oriented. But each episode takes a point from history, a snapshot in time, of an event or events, and dissects it from the look-back point of view. Now that we have passed this point in history, is there something we may have missed? In one episode, which really resonated with me, he interviews the now grown woman, Linda Brown, an African-American whose parents were a significant part of the Supreme Court decision about desegregation of schools. Miss Brown recently passed away in March. This podcast, to me, was extremely enlightening. Students were segregated first upon that Supreme Court passing of the desegregation, but not the teachers. And Miss Brown brought that up, and I was like blown away by the fact that she was like, why didn't the teachers get desegregated? Why weren't the teachers mixed up in the schools? Why didn't they send African-American teachers to the white schools and the white teachers to the African-American schools? And yet they didn't do that. They did the students first, which to me was like ridiculous. And how mind-blowing would it have been? Would it have changed the course of history had they done adults first?
That's right.
So it was just, to me, it was very mind-blowing.
It was one of my, to your point, it was one of my favorite episodes he dove into ever.
It was like fantastic. Microphone dropping, it was just like, wow, who would have thought of that?
It's really great,
So, and this is the great thing about podcasts. A nugget of information, a differing opinion or perspective can create thought-provoking fuel, which can then lead to action and growth by the listener.
So, another great thing that I really like about podcasts, and I think why we're all a fan of them, is, let's be honest, all of us are running businesses. Some of us have a few businesses, and we all know that professional growth and development is really important, but carving out time during the day to sit down with a book or set aside time to do deep dives on the internet, it's just not necessarily possible or even workable given all of the things that we're up to. So that's why I think we really enjoy podcasts. I know for myself, I listen to them while getting ready in the morning. It's just easy to throw on in the background, and you can listen while you're doing other things like making your lunch, getting ready for client meetings. And then also, I had an hour drive here this morning. I could be listening to the radio and tuning out and getting annoyed with traffic on 495. However, when you have podcasts available, it really makes all of that, A, so much more pleasant, and then B, you're getting this learning opportunity before you go into your day. So it's great knowledge on the go. It's like a really good audio book, just in episodic kind of a format.
And it's a really good jolt for the morning, almost better than your cup of coffee.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
can really get those brain things firing up.
Yeah.
The synapses going. So It's awesome. So let's talk about how we access those podcasts.
Yes. So a lot of people have confusion around how you actually get to podcasts, and to this day,
Mm-hmm.
I still get confused with Apple iTunes, just how to find them, what subscribing really means, things of that nature. So we're just going to give the kind of elementary walkthrough of how to do that with fantastic screen shares provided by Nepal behind the scenes.
Yeah, perfect.
So iPhone users can use the pre-installed Apple Podcast app, and Android users will use Google Play. So if you're Android, use Google Play. If you're Apple, you're going to look for iTunes. Both iPhone and Android users can use Spotify, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. If you're on the computer, you can use SoundCloud, Spotify, or Stitcher, one of those three items.
And I was listening to a podcast, and that was only available via SoundCloud.
Oh, interesting.
So I went and downloaded that through that podcast or from the App Store, and then picked up that app.
Oh, wow.
And I'm listening to it through there.
There you go. Yeah. So your choice, dealer's choice. So now that we've talked through how to access them, we're going to talk through different podcasts that we enjoy in different categories. So we're going to start with just personal and professional development in general. So the first one that we're going to cover is Lewis Howes' School of Greatness. And this podcast has grown rapidly to be one of the top ranked business and self-development podcasts in iTunes. It regularly appears in the top 50 of all iTunes podcasts, and it gets downloaded over 2 million times per month. Wow. Crazy. Episodes range from interviews with incredible world-class game changers in entrepreneurship, health, athletics, mindset, and relationship to solo rounds with the host, Lewis Howes, who in his own right has had a really tremendous career. He was a professional athlete before he moved into business and branding and things of that nature.
Yeah.
It's super fun. His guests are pretty cool. Like he'll have on Tony Robbins, Alanis Morissette. How about that?
Wow.
Right. And
Tony Robbins, Alanis Morissette.
Just a variety of people like
yeah.
that. And it's a good all-around leadership development podcast if you're really just wanting to get some juice in the morning, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, he is good. He is good. I've listened to a couple of his. So,
yeah.
What else you got?
The next one, my personal favorite. I love it, probably also because it's founded in DC, so woo-woo for locality. Yeah. But it's NPR's, NPR's How I Built This with Guy Raz. And this podcast is the one I listen to in the morning. In fact, I was just sharing with the ladies that I was listening to it this morning because they had the founder of Angie's List talking about how they got started. And they also feature founders like Lyft, Lululemon, Stitch Fix, Lar Bars. I think they had Whole Foods on there. I mean, if you can think of a pretty prolific company at this time, guaranteed they've probably featured the founder on there. And you know what really struck me is a few weeks ago, maybe it was 2 months ago at this point, I was listening to How I Built This, and they had Kait and Andy Spade on there talking about how they built up the Kait Spade empire. And it was not just 2 weeks after I listened to that I heard of her very sad and unfortunate passing. And I really had the opportunity that I had never had before, other than seeing the brand in handbags and walking through stores, of hearing how she got started and the trials and tribulations and the peek behind the curtain of who she really was as a person. So I implore you guys that's a great, I would say, starters podcast for those of you who have never listened to a podcast before.
Yeah. And that is a kind of a nice feature to realize that these people really are humans.
They are.
You know, they're maybe name brands, Tony Robbins, Alanis Morissette, Kait Spade. They're all famous brands, Lululemon, Whole Foods, Angie's List. All those people are famous. Everybody knows what they are, but yet you don't know the people behind the scenes. And now you get to actually hear from their perspective. And they put on their pants just like we do.
They do.
So, so it's kind of...
Well, I was telling Ellen too, with Angie, the founder of Angie's List, she actually took a hiatus from starting the company and went to get her MBA at Harvard. And they were asking her, was it a different experience for you having started the company and then going into an MBA program? She said, they would talk about modeling and cutting 20% and cutting just 20% of the workforce. And I had to look at my peers and say, have you guys actually had to fire 20% of your workforce before? I don't know if you have an appreciation for what that's really like. So it is, it's very humanizing. Yes. And a second,
gets it down to a real level.
Yes.
Kind of, something more tangible that you can actually, that resonates, and I can actually do that too.
That's right. That's right. And many of them, you'll see, like many of us, it's not like they were top of their class at Stanford. And so, I mean, some of them certainly were, but a lot of them just had tact and resourcefulness and grit and perseverance. And that's how they built billion-dollar companies. And you're like, ooh, okay, me too.
Yes.
So it
can be done.
Another one in that same vein is Entrepreneur on Fire with John Lee Dumas, or as it's affectionately called by its listeners, EO Fire. And I actually heard the reason he calls it EO Fire is because when people were looking for it, they still struggle to spell the word entrepreneur correctly.
Okay.
I get it.
Yeah.
So it's EO Fire. And like how I built this, he talks to founders of companies, but I would say, unlike how I built this with NPR, he talks to your everyday entrepreneur. So it's not people you've heard about or companies rather you've heard about in the headlines because of billion-dollar empires or acquisitions. It's people who start companies like all of us have,
like LeDonne branding and marketing.
Exactly. So, and the other thing I always appreciate with him is the format of the podcast always starts with, what was your worst moment in business? Like, he just really gets into it. Like, what was the absolute low point of your entrepreneurship?
Wow.
And then what was the aha moment that really
Right.
And that's how they start the conversation and lead into it. And it's really cool because you get to hear tips and strategies and things that I would say are a little bit more in the trenches and on the ground floor from people who I feel are peers, not necessarily. They're all aspirational, right? But when I hear how I built this, I'm thinking, wow, the founder of Rent the Runway, I aspire to be like that. But when I hear EO Fire, it feels like I'm fireside chatting with somebody who has a
local
business like mine.
Right.
Exactly. So EO Fire, John Lee Dumas is great. Yeah.
Perfect. So what else is there?
So we kind of covered the business and all around general lifestyle podcast. Now we obviously want to go into accounting specific podcasts that are geared towards your industry, not just accounting, bookkeeping, any really financial services type of podcast. Right. So the first one is the Bigger Pockets podcast. And some of you may be familiar with Bigger Pockets in general. This website is a place where people who are interested in making smart investments, particularly real estate, can go and explore information. It's hosted by Joshua Dorkin and Brandon Turner.
We have been talking so intently that our internet blew. Getting back to it, we were talking about Bigger Pockets and the podcast that Kait listens to all the time.
Yes. So Bigger Pockets, I was saying, I don't know exactly where it cut out, but a young professional who worked for a large accounting firm and would blog for Bigger Pockets and then pitched himself as a guest. So he got on the podcast to talk about the nuances of taxes and how you want to be thinking about finances if you're in real estate investing or development or construction. And no kidding, he said a week after this podcast was released and published, he was receiving so many inquiries, not just locally, but all throughout the country, because it is a very niche field and you need to know the ins and outs of how to do the numbers for a business like this, that he had to hire specifically to keep up with the demand. And now his practice has just taken off. And he employs a good amount of people from around the country to work on things like tax returns, advising. He has put them on retainer in a CFO capacity. So I think the thing I want to underscore here is podcasts they're not only a great thing to listen to as an entrepreneur, but if you have the opportunity, and many of them are always looking for great guests to get on one, it's very, very good for brand awareness and lead generation.
Well, we've worked with a consultant, MSATP has, Jeff Miller.
Yep.
And so Jeff too has been on several podcasts.
Yes.
And so I've actually connected on his website and actually listened to a couple of his podcasts, and that's been very interesting too. So I'm imagining it's really helped his business as well. I know an attorney that had done a podcast on the same, I forget the podcast, it might have been Entrepreneur on Fire, and they were on it, and oh my God, everything it just takes off.
It does. So a little asterisk there. Don't just listen, maybe identify some ones that you think your target customers are listening to, and then go after that, because the riches are in niches, and there are podcasts for every single niche you could ever imagine. I mean, there's a podcast for bakers, there's a podcast for makeup artists. I mean, you name it, they've developed a podcast for it. So you really can be somebody who gets in there and has a brand presence with a very concentrated, focused, and intentional audience.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome.
So the next one that we're going to talk about is accountants doing cool shit.
Pardon us.
Yeah, it's the name of the podcast.
That's right.
And this is about exactly what the title implies. It's accountants who are using their skills, knowledge, and creativity to do some interesting, innovative, unusual, or just plain cool, stuff.
Yeah.
So Lifestyle Accountant, a worldwide networking group, provides services to accounting freelancers and entrepreneurs, including the economic podcast populated by exciting new voices in the field. So this is one where you can really look to who are the innovators in this industry? What are they doing? How are they infusing maybe some traditional practices to do really cool new things?
Right. And probably adapting to the changes with AI and the Bitcoin and some other word, I can't remember, other stuff that's going on in the accounting industry that is trending and big for audit people, financial statement preparation, that kind of stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
So the next one is Future of Accounting with Denitha Doe. This is a really good one for young professionals and business owners who are seeking to attract and employ young professionals. Denitha Doe is one of the millennial generation's top thought leaders and ambassadors, attracting attention from publications such as the Huffington Post, Zero, and Wells Fargo for her expertise.
Wow.
Her podcast, Future of Accounting, is targeted to young people heading into accounting, including students and young professionals just starting their career. So again, I wouldn't say you can't listen to this if you're not a young professional.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, if you're struggling to really figure out why don't young professionals want to work for our firm, or what can we do to engage with them, or young professional business owners, it's a really good one to hop into.
Wow.
Yes.
Very cool. I think we could all use a leg up on how to deal with that generation particularly.
Yeah.
So that would be great.
And I just read yesterday, so I'm a millennial, and I was reading LinkedIn yesterday, and it was like, here comes Gen Z, and I'm like, oh my God, it's happening already. Another generation.
Oy.
And so the last one we're going to talk about is the Abacus Show. The Abacus Show, hosted by Bob the CPA from Abacus U, brings top accounting professionals, influencers, and experts into informative, entertaining financial podcasts. So when you listen to this, you're going to hear things from Abacus U, who offers online courses in topics like resume building and using LinkedIn effectively. We all know we're fans of LinkedIn here. I love LinkedIn. Yeah. And it covers crucial issues for accountants and accounting students, like joining professional organizations.
Hello.
And going digital. Do you have anyone in mind in particular? Right. So, and of course, the cool thing about podcasts, so those are our recommendations for really good places to get started in your podcast journey. But of course, the really great thing about them is it's not just for business and professional. When we say there's podcasts for everything, relationships, parenthood, anything and
everything.
That's right.
I mean, the revisionist history is talking about a historical thing. It's just an interesting snapshot, you know,
right.
and the discussion about what we might have missed.
Yep.
At, and reviewing that historical event, and now it's being looked at with a different sort of eye to it, and you're like, wow, okay. So and that has nothing to do with my profession at all.
Yeah.
Nothing about what I do, but it makes me think.
Yes.
And that sort of can spur other things then to happen.
That's right.
So they're really cool.
Of course, one of the places that we typically get great podcast recommendations for are friends and colleagues and peers. So we're going to turn it over to you. And if in the comments below you have a favorite podcast you listen to in the morning during your drive, please put them on here, and we'll follow up in a blog post and or email campaign, letting the community know which ones that MSATP members really enjoy and that you should be checking out as well. And then who knows, maybe we'll create our own one day.
Well, this is a podcast.
This is
sort of a podcast.
Yes.
We end up on YouTube, and this is definitely would be considered that same sort of genre.
Yeah.
So, totally. Well, thank you, Kait, for bringing all this information
Thanks for
to
having
us.
me.
Hey, pleasure indeed.
Yes.
And we hope our executive director is having a wonderful few days off, well deserved. And we hope you too enjoy the last weekend of summer. Can't believe it's over already. Labor Day weekend, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Don't forget, we do have our day in DC, which is on October 17th. So please check out our website and see if you can sign up. We've got all our seminars are going to start after next weekend, or after this weekend, I should say. We hit the ground running. So there's all kinds of opportunities to expand your knowledge base and get better at what you do, And we look forward to seeing you at all of those future events. And I thank you. Have a great day.